Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, Asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today we are going to discuss a topic which I call educating our Zulu, that is our Zulu family in South Africa, about the Zulu parade in New Orleans. We're going to dispel some myths. There seems to be a controversy going on social media concerning the name Zulu and the way that the Zulu parade members are depicted, and they seem to think it does not represent them in the best light. So we're going to address some of these myths and these issues and a lot more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. I want to thank each and every one of you, first and foremost, for joining this conversation. And it is a very important conversation, and one where we can educate each other on our collective history and cultures and use these as stepping stones for a more united and powerful future. And so before we get started, I want to make sure that each and every one of you like the video, share the video, and if you are not a subscriber yet to this channel, I'm going to need you to hit that button. That is right. We are striving to hit 10,000 subscribers to the channel, and we are already in the 9,000s. So if you have not considered subscribing to this channel, I would encourage you to do so today and help us hit that number. And so we will get started right now. So if you look on your screen, again, educating our Zulu family about the Zulu parade, putting things into their African historical context. And on the left, you see an image or a partial image of a Mardi Gras marcher who is dressed up in this unique, colorful garb, where the headgear is full of feathers. He has a top on with a big Z in it that stands for Zulu. You can see the woven spear and shield that's hanging from the garment, as well as you see him in this unique face paint, which is the base of it is black, but over the eyes it is white, and around the lips it is white. I want you to keep this figure in your head throughout the conversation, because each one of these elements are going to become very important for understanding the topic here today. And so when the Zulus, which is an ethnic group in Azania or South Africa, the Zulu people have just found out about a parade and a group of people who call themselves the Zulus, which is actually the full name, is the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, right? Which is a fraternal organization that is associated with Mardi Gras and the Mardi Gras parade. And you will see them in this kind of what a lot of people believe to be blackface in the historical context of blackface. If you're not familiar with African American history, Europeans starting in the 1800s, after the Civil War, started to depict themselves in blackface. They would put this Budaman or this charcoal on their face to try to imitate black skin, and and exaggerate certain features in a very derogatory manner. And so when people see blackface, this is the first thing that comes to their mind. And so what I want to do is expand our notion of this face painting tradition, because the tradition is not the same when it comes to the Zulu parade. And so just some more images of variations on the attire. So you see a more colorful one on the far left here. Again, blackface on black people. But if you look at all three of the images here, you'll see variations of the black and white combo, right? You'll see the leopard skin or cheetah skin on the left-hand side, whereas on the right-hand side, this gentleman decided to go with a more zebra theme, right? And then, of course, we have the ancestral skull in the center. And so, but all of them are adorned on the head, on the crown, with a bunch of feathers. And so this is going to become very important. And we have a citation that kind of puts all this within the context, right? And then this image is part of the larger parade, an image of the larger parade, or at least a group of people within the parade in New Orleans, Louisiana. And you'll see more colorful costumes, but you'll see the bottom of the gentleman in the center in the black and gold, where he has kind of like the grass apron. And you see the gentleman who's holding the blue backpack on the left-hand side. He also has a grass apron, as well as a almost kind of like a Masonic apron on top of the grass skirt apron or garment, right? And so all of this comes from many different traditions which have been synthesized, and there's a bit of syncretism, which we'll discuss in the moment. And so when the Zulu people, when they imagine themselves, they don't see this here. And it's not, and I'm saying all this to say that it's not supposed to be an exact representation of modern Zulu people. Again, this parade is over 100 years old. Matter of fact, probably like 140 years of age that the Mardi Gras parades have been going on in southern Louisiana, or in the south, and in a place called New Orleans. And I felt compelled to speak about this because New Orleans is home for me, right? I was not born there. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, but I lived there for a short while, and most of my family is from there. So we teeter between Opelousas and New Orleans, Louisiana. So 75% of my family is based out of New Orleans. So New Orleans, 75% of my family is based in Louisiana, period. Or them in New Orleans. The bulk of them is going to be New Orleans and Opelousas, right? So this is something that I grew up with, and I know a little bit of history. We could probably get some more expert scholars to address some more details that I won't be able to cover today. And so I don't want to make this too long, but this is something that I'm very familiar with, as well as Africana studies, because of course I am an Africologist. So we're going to put all our tools together and get to the bottom of this. Now, in the United States, the name Zulu is used for a variety of things in a variety of groups. The most famous outside of the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club um, is the Universal Zulu Nation, which was started by Africa Bambaataa in the Bronx, New York, and part of the emerging hip hop culture, um, which has its roots in the South and in New Orleans, which I have a separate video on this channel discussing. And the Zulu Nation has branched out all around the world, but especially in the United States, of course, as far on the West Coast, and we can see the logo for this branch. There's a larger group called the Zulu Union, and within that you have these but all extending from the Universal Zulu Nation, which started in the Bronx. So you had the 206 Zulu Seattle, and then we have the Anahuac, if I'm saying that correctly, Zulus. Now, if you look at the logos, you will see that the art form is inspired by Native American artwork and symbols and the like. So that is because the vast majority of the members within these groups are descendants of or part of those indigenous Indian groups. So the name Zulu is not only attached to African Caribbean, African American, African Caribbean folks here in the United States, it also has now associated with certain Native American groups that are part of the overall hip hop culture in the Universal Zulu Nation. And it has found its way back home in Uganda. And so even there are Uganda Zulus, right? That's part of the Universal Zulu Nation. And you'll find a whole fantastic hip hop scene in Uganda, right? Uganda has a dope hip hop scene as well as a dope dance hall reggae scene that I encourage everybody to check out if you have the time. So even there's a location, there's a place name, a toponym called Zulu in Indiana, the state of Indiana here in the United States. It's a township, it's an unincorporated township in Jefferson and Allen County, which you can see highlighted on the map right there, right? And according to their history, the name Zulu was just randomly selected back in 1880 or something to that nature, or maybe even earlier. So they're talking about a post office that was established in 1880. So earlier than 1880, the name Zulu became the location of that particular township. So the name Zulu extends beyond the Zulu in South Africa, and that's part of the discourse. And so when it comes to the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club that I mentioned earlier, we have to go back to the early 1900s. And when you go to the wiki site, it'll say Zulu traces its origins to 1909, when the original founders paraded as a marching club. Now, this marching club actually began in 1901. And so if you know anything about New Orleans, pretty much everybody, every household has members as part of a band, right? Like I remember growing up, my dad is from New Orleans, and we grew up with trombones, tubas, all kinds of horns, drums, guitars, keys in the house, and if you ever been to New Orleans, you know that a second line march can happen at any moment for any reason, right? And so this is just part. It's a staple of the culture. And so in 1901, when this marching club called Tramp began, uh, they made a name for themselves as far as the Mardi Gras. Because remember, the Mardi Gras started in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And so it continues between 1912 and 1914. The group had adopted an African theme for their costumes and became known as the Zulus. And so they incorporated themselves. They became a fraternal organization, and they called themselves the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. So they went from being just a marching troupe, a band, to becoming a mutual aid. And this is something that at the turn of the century, all across the United States, Black African people have been creating these mutual aid, insurance, and burial secret societies and fraternal organizations. And so this is one of them. So when you see Zulu here in the United States, it's not an ethnic group. It's a secret society that's centered around aiding in the community, burial rites, and the band tradition, right? Which gives us our blues, our jazz, and all that. All that's going to become important to this conversation. The group took its inspiration from a vaudeville troupe known as the Smart Set, which performed a skit featuring a Zulu theme at the Temple Theater. And so there was another group that the vaudevilles are like a traveling comedic semi-minstrel show, you know, just kind of way that they do plays like the Tyler Perry plays and stuff like that today that had messages and the like. So this one had a Zulu theme, and they were inspired by the Zulus because they were one of the few African groups that they knew, you know, had put up some major resistance to European colonialism, even though they you know failed in the second run. That first run against the British, the stories had traveled worldwide. So they created this scenario, and they studied, you know, what the people look like at this time, and the garments and things that they created at this time was largely based off of just Africans in general. But the Zulus became the the label basically for all African people. And that's why I just said an African theme. And that's why I highlighted their costumes, because this is going to be important. So when we go back to that that first slide, or the like, where we see, or that third slide maybe, when we see the garments here, it may not look like it, but it is reminiscent of some of that early African garments, because, you know, we across the continent, we did not have a large, rich tradition of weaving cloth and making these elaborate today. Those were imports via trade coming from the Middle East and India. And so we'll continue. So like we can see in this early sketch of King Shaka, to Shaka Zulu, that, you know, many of us are familiar with. And this was drawn by James King and was later published in 1836. So this was drawn at the time that Tashaka Zulu was living. So this is their rendition of what Tashaka looked like in 1824 on the left-hand side. And you can see, you know, kind of the string, almost animal skins, you know, garments that we're wearing. So no full body. They weren't wearing shirts. They weren't wearing pants. This is the gear. So you move up in time to like 1879, and here's another sketch of King Setsuwayo Kayempande, And I know the Zulu brothers and sisters could correct me on my pronunciation. And so he was the king of the Zulu kingdom from 1873 to 1884. And on the right, you can see he was wearing the grass um, apron and skirts, or garment, I should say, right? And they had a variety of materials that they used, which included grasses, which included animals, leathers, and the like. And here's an actual photo of that same king in 1875, right? And here's another king of the Zulus, King Dinizulu, in 1883. And so remember that the photo camera was invented in 1816. So we actually have photos of actual Zulu people. And so we know what they look like, what they had their garments on, and so you can see it's not full body garments. When I looked at a whole bunch of the old photos, this is typical of the wear of the Zulus. And so on the right hand side of this image here, you see the grass, skirts or whatnot on this Zulu warrior here. And notice also his headgear is it's a big bushel of feathers, right? And this is common throughout Africa. And this is why on this left-hand side, when you see this early rendition of the Zulu parade from the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club photos, I believe this is before 1950 on the left-hand side. You see the grass garments, the strings here in terms of the wear, and they don't have too many feathers on the top of their head, but we'll see other representations where it is. So there's aspects of the Zulu tradition that is still maintained in the wear, although there have been other additions from other places, and including Native America as well as other places in Africa, which we will discuss later. So the grass skirts, for example, that the women wear amongst the Zulu is called isigege, right? And now when you look in the definitions or in a dictionary for the definitions, it says loincloth, but it wasn't originally a loincloth because they did not have those cloths in abundance there. They didn't have a tradition of that. But since cloths have been traded and people know how to make them now, it's now associated with the loincloth, right? But so now it's this was the loin skirt that was worn by women, and you can even see this in all the way up in the Sudan amongst the Nuer people that you see in this photo right here. So these are teenage girls who are wearing similar skirts as we saw in the previous slideshow. So it's not exclusive to the Zulus. This is typically an African thing, but it's more so typically an indigenous thing around the world, and this is part of the cultural memory. But as I mentioned earlier, there are kind of like leather straps, animal skins that they also use in conjunction with the other materials that we mentioned, as we see in this image right here. And so this is why you see this incorporated in the dress of the Mardi Gras parades. So regardless of how the individual is dressed, so I'm pointing here because we actually see the Zulu name here because it's part of that Zulu troop. And we see this brother here, part of the Omega Psi Phi fraternal organization, also part of the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, right? But notice, just like how we saw in the Zulu warrior, this head full of feathers and the like. And when you go amongst the collagen in Kenya, they have something similar, but it's made of furs. You see the same thing over here with this brother in the orange, right? So the South African Zulus do not incorporate within their everyday get up the masking or the face paint. This has nothing to do with South African Zulus, right? This is part Native American and part Congo tradition, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so before we go there, of course, we got to introduce the people from Haiti. And so and I have family members in my lineage who came with the Great Migration from Haiti, which you'll find they went into places like Louisiana and dominated also in places like Florida in the South. And you know that Haitian culture and the voodoo that was brought with them helped to shape Louisiana culture in general, but especially Mardi Gras and the Mardi Gras Indian culture, as well as blues and the development of jazz and the whole like, right? And so here is just some people who are in Haiti, you know, today that still practice the traditional ancestral religion, which we call voodoo, but their voodoo is not the strict voodoo that you find on the continent of Africa in a place called Benin, among the Fon and the Ewe and the like in that area. But it is a mix of a few Taino concepts, but is mainly dominated by the Benin culture as well as the Congo culture, right? So a lot of Congo traditions. So you had people who are from the Congo who were in Haiti and made their way into Louisiana, and then you already had people from Congo who were enslaved and was a part of those first waves into Louisiana, which was controlled by the French until the Louisiana Purchase. So this becomes very important. So even when you go to Haiti and they have their carnival parades, these are modern photos, even though they're in black and white, and you can see in Haiti the same stringy grass skirts, you know, plant-based skirts and aprons. And if you look on the left, you see instead of the face being painted, the practitioner is wearing a black mask, a garment mask, right? And what do you see around the eyes? The eyes painted white, like you saw in some of the other things, right? So in these is like one eye that's painted, but like this person who here where you see the word Zulu has both of his eyes painted white, right? This is Haiti, not the United States, not Louisiana. And so we see the dotted white spots on the person on the right hand side. He has his face painted, but his face is painted white. And so as you can see, he is representing Sekhmet in the form of Sakpata that Sekhmet traveled to places like Nigeria and Benin and Togo and the like. And this is a representation of that indigenous tradition here in the Western world. And so when you are talking about the African retentions in the United States, you have to talk about it in terms of syncretism. It's not one tradition. African Americans, Afro Brazilians, Afro Caribbeans, they're not one people. You know, we don't, in terms of they're not one people. They may be known by their individual ethnic and island nationalities, for example, but their ancestry comes from all across the continent of Africa. And so, with that being the case, they blend many of those different African traditions into one. So you'll see fragments of things isolated, like we see with the Benin stuff on the left hand side in terms of the mask, and then you see on the right hand side the kind of Yoruba tradition in terms of sakpata, which is a variation of segment, and we've had this conversation on our channel before as well. So that being the case, when you go to Brazil in their carnival, it is the same thing. So you see this obviously African woman with her face painted black, and the eyes, instead of being white around the eyes, it is painted gold to match the rest of her garment. But this is common for those Africans in Brazil. So there's more to this concept of the black face paint than simply a black face as created by white folks. And I'll have to do a separate video, but it looks like, although they started off with it being racist in terms of blackface, that it may have been inspired by ritual traditions of the Africans, for which they took and used it to mock us. But that's going to be in a separate video. And so we see this same tradition as far away as Papua New Guinea. And so you can see from this representation on your screen right now that the women are in their traditional skirts that is also made of grasses and plant-based. And this is on the other side of the world. So that's why I have the arrow here at the bottom pointing to the grass skirt garments, as well as you see the big headgear with the feathers, and you see the faces painted black with the eyes white around the eyes. And notice some of them, they have the lips painted white. This has nothing to do with white people and blackface. This is an ancient tradition. Now I have to do some research to see how more common this is across the world, and to try to give a possible timeline to how old this is. But the fact that we see this being done in Papua New Guinea, and these people have been separated from Africa for thousands of years, and they're doing the same traditions that you find in Louisiana and Haiti and Brazil right now. And so this is more Papua New Guineans. These guys aren't in the blackface, but you see, if you look on your closely on the screen, you'll see the individuals that have kind of like the deities on the top of them. One of them is in the blackface with the white eyes, right? The exaggerated white eyes, and they too are wearing the grass skirts, right? And we see this is in Mexico, and so remember I said that the Africans, we were brought here in the United States and in Central Africa and Mexico. So we were forced to in many cases live amongst the Native Americans that were here. So there's some things that come from Native Americans, and or there are some things that Native Americans do that mirror what we do on the continent, because many other indigenous people around the world, they are earth-based, nature-based. So they get their inspiration from things in nature. And because we have similar ecologies, you may find certain things that are parallel. So in this instance, they paint the entire body black. They do this in Haiti too. I was going to add those pictures, but I made dude, I didn't want to make this too long, so I didn't want to keep adding photos. But in Haiti too, they paint the entire body black. And the Mayans, indigenous Mayans, they also in ritual paint the entire body black, right? And here is some modern individuals from the Mayans and Aztec Day region, all across from Texas, Louisiana, Mexico. Because remember, all that was really Mexico before the Europeans came and colonized this area and the Louisiana Purchase and all that, right? So all the way going into Central America, they have this ritual, this custom of painting the entire body, including the face, black, like you see in this image here. And so even their deities, when you see the representation of their deities, so this is not a Mayan representation, this is an Aztec representation. But you still see the even though this is a deity, we know that the body is painted black because the hands are in the kind of normal reddish color, and but the body is painted black, and then parts of the face are painted black with a different color that's painted on the face as well, right? And so when you're going back to the Mayans in Mexico, you see their temple walls with them painted in all black. And we have to make a statement here, because when you see this, you'll see some pseudos historians trying to say that the indigenous Indians are black because they see this on the walls, not knowing this is a representation of the Mayans wearing black body paint. And so we'll probably have to get a living Mayan who's also a historian who can tell us the details of why they do this particular ritual. But just like the Africans who wear the leopard and cheetah skins, they wear the leopard and jaguar skins with the spots and stuff on them as well. And they also wear feathers on it. So there's many common parallel traditions that synthesize themselves in Louisiana amongst the Africans and the Native Americans that are there, because Native Americans and Africans form maroon communities in Louisiana, and certain aspects of the cultures have blended there, right? So this is why we give homage and things to this nature to Native American Indians. You can see this African American woman who is wearing a very elaborate Mardi Gras costume, and it has depicted and sewn into the front a patch with a Native American Indian on it, right? A red Native American Indian. Two of them to be exact. There's one's a woman and one's a man. And you notice the man has a black paint on, it looks like a kind of a Zorro mask on his head, which you can see that I clipped out and made it bigger so you can zoom in and see there, right? So, but notice that, again, we don't have to say that things were inspired by Native Americans on this, because there's parallelisms. So with our mask in Africa, you find stuff like this. So I have this book, it's called Secrecy, African Art That Conceals and Reveals. It's a big big table art book. And this image I took or I scanned or whatnot, and this is a mask from Sogo, Gabon, and you can see it's in the black and white. It's a black rooted, black base mask in terms of wood, and then around the eyes you see these big swooshes of white paint, also below the mouth and on top of the forehead. And you'll see these, similar kind of representations in the Mardi Gras mask that are in the form of paint. So we're going to get into what it is. So when you see the face paint of the Mardi Gras Indians and then the Zulus in particular, it is a representation of a mask, like a traditional African mask. But they were allowed to have masking things and to keep African cultures, certain aspects of African culture, when they were ruled by the French, when the French owned and controlled Louisiana. But when they sold Louisiana during the Louisiana Purchase as a result of losing to the Haitians in the Haitian-French Wars, in a Haitian Revolution, the British colonials, and that became the United States, purchased it, and they put a moratorium on open acts of African culture. And we're going to see that this is how the masking starts. So instead of having wooden masks like you would have in Africa, they settle for the face paint because this was allowed, right? So let's continue. And so this is why it's important to, read texts like the Bantu speaking heritage of the United States, because Gabon is a place that has a large number of Bantu language speakers, but Bantu cultures and languages are instrumental to the development of African American culture. They were the most influential groups coming out of Congo, coming out of Cameroon, Gabon, Angola, Zaire, whatever you want to say, Central African Republic, right? Mozambique, Madagascar. People forget about that. African Americans have ancestry in Mozambique and in Madagascar. So some may have continental Indian ancestry, like a small percentage may show up, and that's because their ancestry, more than likely, either they came from the Caribbean recently, and which would show larger in terms of their autosomal DNA. But if you have trace amounts, it's more than likely that your ancestors came via Madagascar, right? But that's another discussion for another time. So we're going to keep going. So I want to read extensively from this book here. It is called Jazz Religion, the Second Line in Black New Orleans. So for those who don't know about the second line is a marching tradition, a band marching tradition that usually accompanies funerals. So we have funeral, a part of our funeral rites to sending the deceased off is to have a second line band follow the casket to the grave, and they play somber music, but there's the part where the music picks up and we end up on a happy note. So that happy jazz note, or what is famous for in terms of second line music, that's what that tradition is. And so this is going to be very important for you people in South Africa to understand a rich tradition from which y'all are being known for, that comes out of this this second line tradition and the actual Zulu parade itself. But this is the author, Richard Brent Turner, and I'm going to read from his text. There's a second edition that is out that continues the story after Katrina hit, which was in 2005. And I'm so mad that it hit for many reasons, but we had a lot of records at my grandmother's house in New Orleans, which was flooded out, which we could not regain a lot of that information that was uh, at my grandmother's house. So it was very devastating, even though I didn't live personally through it, but my aunt, my dad's sister did, and she had to move to Houston, Texas as a result of Katrina, her and her son. So rest in peace, my aunt Daphne. Um, but I'm gonna keep going, right? So the chapter that I am going to read from in the subsection is titled "The Emergence of the Mardi Gras Indian Tradition, Haitian and Congo Continuities." So again, when you see Mardi Gras Indians, it has nothing to do with some alleged uh, indigenous heritage that Black people are holding on to in the United States. That it is a mask, it is a syncretism, but it is rooted in actual Haitian and Congo tradition. So meaning Haitian, Benin, Congo tradition, right? So we read starting from page 52. The Congo and Haitian origins of sequin, that sequence, that elaborate bead work and sewing and the like, which you saw in a couple of the photos. Art's work of the early Mardi Gras Indian tribes had a great impact on the resistance strategies of jazz religion. Remember, jazz is the religion in Louisiana and especially in New Orleans, the birthplace of jazz. In late 19th and early 20th century New Orleans, thus emphasizing Mardi Gras Indian second line performances as important loci for religious and musical recreations of the African diaspora. So in jazz music, in the Mardi Gras Indians, in Mardi Gras, in second line, these are all resistance strategies, cultural resistance strategies that are formulas and techniques and technologies to maintain African culture and religion. And we'll get more into that in a second. So a few things I have highlighted because I also have a digital copy. So the first Mardi Gras Indian tribes appeared in the 1880s, as I mentioned before. So this is before the Zulu parade. This before the Zulu parade was part of Mardi Gras, and the Zulu social aid and pleasure club. So this is 1880s. So the first Mardi Gras Indian tribes appeared in the 1880s, a decade of profound changes for Black New Orleans. Why? Because during this period, the Americanization of the city was consolidated as the Jim Crow system eliminated the Francophone three-tier racial systems of Blacks, Creoles of color, and whites. And for those who don't know, by tradition of New Orleans, I'm a Creole because of my European and African ancestry, right? We would be equivalent to the quote unquote coloreds in South Africa, but we call them Creoles here in Louisiana. And so they eliminated that system. So anybody would, as a result of the Louisiana Purchase, once the Americans took over, they got rid of the three-tier system, which was Blacks, Creoles, and whites, and put Creoles and Blacks together and labeled them Black, and kept whites because they wanted to keep whites and quote unquote people of color separate. Suddenly, the downtown Francophone Catholic Creoles of color and of uptown Protestant African Americans were grouped together, classified as Negroes and segregated from whites. And at this momentous time, one could say that jazz emerged through the musical interaction between Creole, classically trained musicians who were thrown together with the uptown African Americans who played the blues and spiritual rhythms of Black Baptist and Methodist churches by ear. Both the uptown and downtown musicians had fresh memories of Congo Square. Why? because 1880s, when was slavery abolished? 1865. And so if 1880, that's only essentially a couple of years later. So these people who's creating these traditions, their mothers and fathers were enslaved Africans in the Americas. And they had memory of African cultures, African customs, African, to a certain extent, African languages still. Because in Louisiana, people were coming in from the Congo and Madagascar and Mozambique into the 1800s. And some were being snuck in as far as Mississippi and Alabama. So both the uptown and downtown musicians had fresh memories of Congo Square and remembered the songs of voodoo and the African diaspora in their music. Because before that, not too long, you had the Haitian Revolution, you had those Haitian migrants. So voodoo tradition is strong, and voodoo and Yoruba tradition is strong in Louisiana, and especially New Orleans. And then it says Wynton Marsalis writes, but I skipped that section, so we're going to go past that section on page 53. So the 1880s were also noteworthy for the establishment of numerous Black brass bands, orchestras, mutual aid and benevolent associations, fraternal organizations, unions, workmen's groups, military drill teams, sporting clubs, and social aid and pleasure clubs that sponsored second line parades and funeral processions. In the earlier 20th century, the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club became the major Black carnival organization in the city. In 1883, Chief Bakate Baptiste is also my grandfather's first name on my mother's side, who's from New Orleans, who was of mixed African and Native American ancestry, began masking Indian. So when we talk about this masking Indian, it's a particular thing. And this is in 1883 that this begins. On Mardi Gras Day with his downtown 7th Ward Creole Wild West Indian gang. Quickly, the custom of masking Indian in quotes on Carnival Day was adopted by numerous Black New Orleans tribes or gangs in downtown and uptown neighborhoods. So those marching groups, those crews as we call them, you know, they started one by one after Chief Bakate Baptiste, you know, introduced this concept of masking like an Indian. The tribes were secret societies, primarily male, that were organized in working class areas like Treme, the 9th Ward, Gert Town, and New Orleans housing projects. According to an early newspaper account, they prepared in bands from 20 to 30, singing war songs and doing the war dance. This is why, if you understand this, you'll understand No Limit, the record company, and why it's a lot of war music. Because Louisiana was a military port as well. A lot of people join the military who come from Louisiana, and a lot of our drumming style came from military drums and cadence that we put our own spin to. So those war songs become, you know, F the mother niggas because I'm down for my niggas. F the mother niggas, I'm down for my niggas. I ride for them. F the mother. If you understand what I just read, you'll understand No Limit Soldiers and the music that come out of Louisiana, them war songs, right? Their chants, composed of Creole and African-American vernacular, were sung to the percussion of sticks, bottles, tambourines, and hand clapping in rhythmic trance-like dances. Eventually, dressed in intricate hand-sewn Indian suits and crowns made with many pounds of feathers, beads, and sequins, each tribe interacted fluidly and by improvisation with second liners and brass bands as it paraded through the territory of its neighborhood and sometimes violently confronted members of different tribes with hatchets, swords, or knives. Certainly, one remarkable aspect of this new performance tradition was the creation of a ritual space where Black men could boldly express rebellious and political resistance behavior similar to that of the 19th century Natchez Indians. The tribe's behavior was also reminiscent of the stick fighting bands, parallel mock fighting carnival traditions in the African diaspora of 19th century Trinidad and Capoeira in Brazil. Like, this history is deep and it's rich, right? Oh, there we go. However, the underlying spiritual philosophy of Mardi Gras Indian circumatlantic performances originated in, quote, remembering songs of Haitian voodoo in Congo Square. Jason Berry writes that the Congo Square rituals and voodoo cultists maintained African drumming in New Orleans more or less covertly in the Reconstruction era. In the early 1880s, the tribal percussion sensibility shifted to handheld instruments with the emergence of Mardi Gras Indian tribes. Thus, masking Indian was a performance strategy related to the spirit of voodoo. For mask were spirit faces of the ancestors of deities. So when you see the face paints, when you see the different colors, including the black face and all that, these are masks. These are voodoo spirits. These are ancestors. You see this all up in Nigeria. You see this all in Cameroon. You see this all in Congo. Because these are the descendants of people who originated in those areas, who were forced to come here to the United States and the Caribbean, and who brought those traditions with them. Continuing, in this context, hold on, let me go back. Let me make sure. Yeah, in this context, for mask were spirit faces of the ancestors of the deity. Text Mardi Gras, a season of Christian devotion, was a cultural opening for performance that recreated memories of slavery in the African American Indian maroon communities of the 18th and 19th century Louisiana, when Blacks embraced the Indian persona. They also subversely substituted the performance of the Native American spirit of rebellion for the overt reenactment of the voodooist resistance strategies in their performances in Congo Square. The Mardi Gras Indians were not alone in performing Native American substitutions at the turn of the 20th century, when the practice of voodoo was made illegal in New Orleans. The spiritual churches of New Orleans, which combine aspects of Pentecostalism, Catholicism, and voodoo, often call on the spirit of Black Hawk, the rebellious Midwestern Native American leader of the 1830s, to fight their battles in the spirit world. So they had to do syncretism, because African religion, open African spirituality and religion, was banned when the Americans took over Louisiana. So what they did is they substituted the outward appearance of African traditions with Native American stuff and motifs. Why? In both these fascinating communities, the Indians are utilized in performances to restage events of circumatlantic encounters and surrogation, in which European experience remains only obliquely acknowledged, if at all. In the early 20th century, Native American substitutions for African ceremonial memories were a politically safe strategy. Why? At that point, Indians were no longer considered a threat to white supremacy in the United States, as most Indian communities have been subject to systematic genocide in the 19th century. So We took on the Indian persona because white people were not threatened by it. It was a survival strategy. But the Native American looking motifs are really hiding African motifs, philosophy, spiritual practices, values, and virtues. Robert Ferris Thompson's provocative analysis of the Congo origins of feather and sequin arts in Haiti and in New Orleans explicates this three-side, therefore circumatlantic, relationship of memory, performance, and surrogation among the Mardi Gras Indians. He writes, and I'm about to quote it, but I'm going to let you know the book where it comes from. So if you can get this book, I highly recommend. It's another art book. It's a table book, a coffee table book, as I should say. And this is the late Dr. Robert Ferris Thompson. He was actually initiated into Voodoo and Yoruba traditions, which is why he can speak so eloquently on these particular arts. And he was good friends with the late Dr. Fukiao as well. So, you know, Fukiao was a major mentor and informant when it came to Congo philosophy and arts. So this book here is called Face of the Gods, Art and Altars of Africa and the African Americans, right? So now we're still quoting, we're quoting from the book Jazz Religion, second line in Black New Orleans, but this is coming from, this particular quote here is coming from Robert Ferris Thompson's book, Face of the Gods, right? So, let me go back. So, as altar, the crossroads, and we know the crossroads, not only in the Congo traditions, but in Yoruba tradition, is an important meeting space for spiritual activity. The crossroads came with 1,000 voices to the Americas. Haitian healers make Congo paquets, therefore bags with feathers inserted at the top to indicate heaven and within them earths, embedding spirit. And so and I don't know why I didn't add this photo of that implement. And so the feathers become very important in terms of the relationship to the concept of sky. Why? Because what does Zulu mean? It means sky, it means heaven in the isiZulu language. But we're going to show that it is not simply or isolated to the isiZulu speakers in South Africa, right? So in Africa, Congo healers are known as leopards of the sky, therefore predatory birds, hence their feathered bonnets. The climax was New Orleans, city of Congo Square. And there's also a Congo Square here in Philly as well, which is probably why it's such a rich tradition of soul music here in Philly, and why some of the dopest rappers come out of Philly, known and unknown rappers. Like that has to be a whole show and a conversation in itself, the Congo Square here in Philadelphia. But the Congo Square that he's talking about here is, of course, in New Orleans. So let me track back. In Africa, Congo healers are known as leopards of the sky, therefore predatory birds. We're talking about hawks and eagles, hence their feathered bonnets. So when you're looking at a feather, the feathers on top of the head is a representation of a priesthood. That's why they wear the leopard skins and cheetah skins, because of the spots. And we'll see a photo of a hawk, an eagle hawk, that also has the spots on it. That's why they're called the leopards of the sky. They're talking about hawks. And the feathers represent this particular priesthood, and a healer and diviner, which are known as what? The leopards of the sky. therefore predatory birds, hence their feathered bonnets. The climax was New Orleans, city of Congo Square. Here, the all-over feather costumes of Black Mardi Gras Indian groups compare directly with the all-over feather mask of the Luongo region of Congo. Sequins mask an inner presence of Congo bearing through an outwardly Creole manifestation in Patois Haitian Congo context. They become ritual metallic dotting. Ritual dotting associates with the secrets and the powers of the dead in Congo. Sequins light up the flag, which ushers in voodoo services. Sequins translate into visual Creole, the ancient dotting patterns, which in Congo stood for spotted mediatory felines. Moving between the two worlds, bush and village, the power of mediation return in the scintillating flags, bringing in the gods, which are called nature. That's why the nature symbol is represented by a flag. But we'll get into that in another discussion, right? So these black and white, these spots and things is representation of being able to move between heaven and earth. That's why when we go back up to the top here, it talks about the Congo pakuye bags with feathers inserted at the top to indicate heaven, within the bag them earths embedding spirit, right? It's deep. It's not for play. It's not random. These things we're taking common themes in Native American culture and using it to mask and present openly African culture, philosophy, ritual, spirituality. That's what's being done here. So when you see, for example, in this Nyundu culture in the Democratic Republic of Congo, these feathered masks, notice around the eyes the whiteness, and around the lips the whiteness. But instead of being black in terms of the base of the mask, it is red in this one. But all around the mask, you see these feathers. This is Congo tradition. The Chihongo, spirit of wealth, among the Chokwe in Angola. This is a tribal mask. What do you see at the top? Full of feathers. This isn't Native American. We're using the Native American to represent African concepts. Here's another variation from the same people out in Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo. You see the deep bushels of feathers and the sequins and all this other kind of stuff on the mask. So since we couldn't openly create African masks and do our rituals, we painted our face to represent mask, and we created these crowns of feathers to represent the heavens. This is the modern representation in the United States of African spirituality that is still openly practiced in New Orleans. New Orleans, there's two places in the United States that have the greatest African retentions here. That's Louisiana, more specifically New Orleans, and in the Carolinas around the Gullah Geechee areas. I was born in the southernmost tip of Gullah Geechee country in the top part of Florida, but it extends all the way up to North Carolina. Right. So, you know, the mass, this is the essence of African secret societies. We present to you one thing, but it means something else. So you looking at this saying, this is Indians, Native American stuff. It's not. This is African. And we're using Native American motifs as a mask for stuff that we were already doing in Africa, which was banned here in the United States. This is our tradition. So when you see these Mardi Gras, quote unquote, Indians, and this is the Zulu, you see the cheetah and leopard skin on the left-hand side here of this Zulu with the grass skirt, the mask. Look at the mask. Look at his face in the center. Look at his face on the left-hand side, and then come look at this mask. Ooh, let me go back. I'm sorry. And look at this mask from Congo. So when we do stuff, it's not, we don't imitate white folks. It's not blackface. Whatever white folks is doing in their misrepresentation of African culture, that's another conversation. This is something different. And so even when you look at the Zulus as Bantu speakers, they're doing the same thing, but there isn't as elaborate. Well, this is an old photo anyway. So this photo comes from 1950. But what do you see on the head? Elaborate heads, not headrests, but head crowns with the feathers on them. You don't see any of the grass skirts here. They have more of the animal skins here, but you also see just like in this photo here, the cheetah leopard skins. You see the same thing here amongst the Zulus here. But this is Bantu culture in general. The Zulus do not have a monopoly on this. And so remember, we keep in the jazz religion text, for which we was just quoting, and also the Faces of the Gods that we were quoting, they kept mentioning Congo, Congo, Congo. And so in Kikongo, the language for which a lot of the main speakers spoke who came here, what is the word for above? Up is Zulu. Remember that the feathers represented the sky, Zulu. And I looked at numerous dictionaries, and you'll find it, this word Zulu, in many of the Kikongo dictionaries. Sky, air, ether, celestial sphere, celestial blue, heaven. But it also is the word for eagle and hawk. So remember, and I don't know what slide that was. What slide is? So this is slide 47. So I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna go back. Why is so I'm gonna jump back because we're gonna read from Robert Ferris Thompson, Face of the Gods again. So when he says, as altar, the crossroads came with 1,000 voices to the Americas. Haitian healers make Congo paquiettes, bags with feathers inserted at the top to indicate what? Zulu, heaven, and within them earths, embedding spirit. In Africa, Congo healer diviners are known as leopards of the sky, therefore predatory birds, hence their feathered bonnets. And what do you call those predatory birds in Kikongo? Or at least one of the predatory birds. You call it Zulu, which is the eagle and the hawk, and this is a eagle hawk. It's called an eagle hawk. And what do you see on the front of the eagle hawk? The spots. So that's why they call the diviners the leopards of the sky. They call them Zulu, the hawk. because like the leopard, like the cheetah, they have this distinguishing spot marks, those dots, those sequence dots that are also embedded in the costumes of the Mardi Gras Indians, right? So, you know, and a word for leopard, their main word for leopard is in Kikongo, but another word is Nkosi. And so Nkosi is used for chief, is used for leopard, is used for lion. So that's why you can say probably like Nkosi Wazulu in Kikongo. And so when it talked about that implement with the bottle with the feather on top that's tied and it has earth in it, embodying spirit, you know, that that feather and things is they also call Noko Jazulu, the dew of heaven. And it's talking about mind. That's why you wear the feathers on the crown of your head. It's talking about the mind. It's talking about ideas, concepts, solutions, spirit mind, the ability to travel into space and the like, right? And in some other lecture, I'll show how all of that are variations of the word in ancient Egyptian called necher, right? So, you know, in Chiluba, they still have the more ancestral pronunciation. But one way to say the word hawk in Kikongo, a neighbor of the Baluba, is Zulu. But you would say, you know, in Proto-Bantu, Kodi. And so this was palatalized from ch to s and from ts to z. And so when you talk about the Zulu of South Africa, you know, when you go on just the wiki website, it says the Zulu were originally a minor clan in what is today northern KwaZulu Natal, founded in 1574 by Zulu Kamalandela. In the Nguni languages, Izulu means heaven or weather. In Kikongo, they would say Ezulu with an E in front. Ezulu means heaven or weather. At that time, the area was occupied by many large Nguni communities and clans, also called the Isizwe people or nation, or called Isibongo, referring to their clan or family name. Nguni communities had migrated down Africa's east coast over millennia as part of the Bantu migrations. As the nation began to develop, the rulership of Shaka, about 250 years after it was founded, brought the clans together to build a cohesive identity for the Zulu. So most of the Zulu, remember the Zulu was a minor community, but most of the Zulu aren't ethnically Zulu, um, or at least historically, right? He consolidated them through war to Shaka and made other ethnic groups Zulu folks. And those who were able to resist to Shaka kept their ancestral names, right? And so when you go to study.com, it says something very interesting here. It says, according to Zulu ancestral belief, the first Zulu patriarch was the son of an Nguni chief who lived in the Congo Basin of Central Africa. By the early migrated to Natal, where they lived among other Nguni-speaking chiefdoms. There were ongoing power struggles among these chiefdoms, right? And we talk about this stuff when we review Jordan Ngabani's book, Conflict of Minds. He gives a real good analysis of that, which I highly recommend for everyone. The book was published in 1979, right? So they come from Congo, the same place that the African Americans come from. The same place where it is named after, where Congo Square is named after, both in New Orleans and here in Philadelphia, right? And it would make sense because when you go to the Congo, you have many places, population centers with the name Zulu in it. So when you go to Malawi, you have Zulu Hill. It's the name of a hill out there, right? When you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Lower Congo and Banza and Gungu, it's a population place called Zulu. There's another place in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Vunzi Zulu. And then there's Impini Zulu, Democratic Republic of Congo, populated place. Zulu in the Ituri Mahagi. Ituri, there's a river and a forest there, right? Zula in Mozambique, where my mother's ancestors come from, direct ancestors, Makua people in Mozambique. That's where my maternal line directly comes from, in Mozambique. In Zimbabwe, you have Zulu, also a name of a hill out there. And you also have Zula in South Africa, Eastern Cape Coast, which is the name of a mountain. And I put these hills and mountains there because the Zulu means, there's in Kikongo, Zulu can also mean a tower or a high place. So that's why these hills and mountains are named Zulu or Zula, variations of it, Zulu in Zimbabwe, among the Mashona, right? So the Congo is where the Zulu from South Africa originate. And they still have places named Zulu. So their name, even though they have some mythology behind it in present lore, may be the result of the earliest small group or branch that came from these areas that are called Zulu. So we have to do some more investigation on that. But it's important to understand this conversation because, it is that Congo tradition that, and the Haitian and Benin and Voodoo tradition that gives birth to the Mardi Gras Indian tribes, that gives birth to jazz music, and the Zulus in second line, which you see here, because if there is no Voodoo, if there is no Congo, if there is no Mardi Gras Indians, if there is no Zulu parade, there is no jazz, there is no second line. And if there is no jazz and there is no second line, there is no house music. And if there is no house music, there is no amapiano music, for which the South Africans are known for today. And a matter of fact, this is not, a fib. They tell you this stuff in their own history. So even we can look at this brief video clip. They tell you.
Translated in the Zulu language, amapiano simply means the piano. The name came from the genre's early jazz influences. Sonically, it's a blend of many genres, along with kwaito, local house music that dominated the airwaves in the 90s.
I remember that. Yeah.
Mosquito is the godfather of South African dance music. The legendary producer and kwaito pioneer explained how it all started.
Kwaito is the foundation of amapiano. The guys who really influenced amapiano, they started playing this deep house, you know what I'm saying, but at a slower pace, to understand.
There is no jazz, there is no soul, there is no disco, which gives birth to house music and deep house, which jazz and deep house, of course, with indigenous South African rhythms, gives birth to amapiano. And if it wasn't for the Indian tradition in New Orleans in Mardi Gras, you wouldn't have the modern minstrel parades, which are famous in Cape Town. Y'all didn't know they had a minstrel parade? We'll look at a clip that show you from 2024, their minstrel parade. What does it look like they're trying to imitate? Or emulate, I should say. This isn't New Orleans. This is in Cape Town, South Africa. As you can see, it's not quite, but you can tell where the inspiration comes from. So you see here that South Africans are trying to say that African Americans are denigrating them, when it is actually the South Africans who are trying to imitate what's going on in Louisiana. And we know that this parade, this minstrel, this coon parade, right? And I'm not exaggerating here. This is the stuff that it was called. This is called a minstrel parade. But they changed the name, but not knowing that minstrel can be offensive as well. And so this is over 100 years, but they keep getting their inspiration from the black folks in New Orleans, but they don't have the same rhythms, because their rhythms would have given birth to their amapiano, but it did not. It comes out of the jazz and house traditions that was mentioned by their historians as well, mixed in with some of the local drumming. You can, of course, in amapiano, you hear their local drumming as well, and especially with that log rhythm, right? So it's instead of making this about, imitation and whatnot, we should have a conversation about mutual influence and how it comes back full circle, because it's that Zulu parade. It is the indigenous Congo African. Remember, it's the Congo that gave birth to the South African Zulus. It's the Congo that gave birth to the blacks in New Orleans in large part, right? And it gives it's that Congo, Benin tradition, Haitian tradition, in African American blues and rhythms and things that give birth to jazz, which gives birth to disco, which gives birth to hip hop as well. But in this particular line, to house music and deep house, which gives birth to amapiano. And not only that, this whole minstrel carnival parade, which they were trying to imitate what was going on in Louisiana amongst the African Americans in the 1880s. And so it is this thing that we have to, keep in mind when we're having this conversation. But, y'all got to know how it is actually done in New Orleans when we talk about second line and marching. And so I always like to show this video, and we're going to end the conversation with this 10-minute video. So for those of you in New Orleans, in South Africa, this is how the second line should go. All right.
This is what we do every Sunday, second line Sunday, man. Yeah! Get that fucking money!
Call man with the
That one all day!
I'm shot $5, whatever you drink. I ain't control the very size superfly. I'm shot $5, whatever you drink.
It's wonderful to be in New Orleans.
The one and only VIP. Hey, girl. Hey, Fi, what we doing when they let us hit the streets? Everything, know the vibe? Everything!
Something down here, man, it's religion for us, man, it's church.
What awesome dog you feel, dude? Everybody out here. You want to find out where your kids at, your mama? Everybody out here. So if the kids at home, your mama out here. Keep it real, keep it real.
It's a vibe, a Nola vibe.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.